Japan in 1990, that was a great era. Recently, overseas markets, especially the Japanese stock market, have reached new highs every day. Looking at our Shanghai Composite Index again, only envy can be said. The pessimistic atmosphere has given rise to a view that China is repeating the mistakes of Japan 30 years ago. The reason is that the changes in some aspects between the two are too similar. Japan's economy grew 52 times in the 40 years after the war, while China's economy grew 50 times in the 40 years after the reform. Japan's urbanization rate in 1990 was 60%, while China's urbanization rate in 2022 was 65%. Japan's 90-year macro leverage ratio was 277%, while China's 2022 macro leverage ratio was 281.8%. What happened to Japan afterwards? It is that lost 30 years, the property market plummets, the stock market plummets, a large number of enterprises go bankrupt, the unemployment rate soars, and the fertility rate plummets sub-replacement fertility. Will China follow suit? Objectively speaking, naturally not. After all, China and Japan have vastly different mountains and rivers in terms of sovereignty, system, economic size, social stage, and population structure. It is absolutely impossible to simply compare them like this. The resilience demonstrated by China in any aspect is by no means comparable to that of the latter. However, there are indeed similar cultural and economic development paths between China and Japan, and it is not uncommon to use Japan's experience as a historical reference for reflection and warning. Fantastic dreams. In the summer of 1985, Tokyo was filled with towering buildings, and amidst the atmosphere of debauchery and wealth, there was a fleeting sense of the future. In those years of Japanese society, consumption was a virtue, and comparison was a nobility. In those years, the Japanese collectively had a beautiful dream. In that dream, they were the richest in the world, able to buy the United States and even the world. In that dream, it was easy to get rich, the sound of decadence was heard all the time, and hedonism became popular. During the economic boom, there was a huge talent shortage in society, with hundreds of companies closing down every year due to insufficient manpower. All HR staff are busy, and fresh graduates are particularly in demand. As long as you come for the interview, regardless of whether you are hired or not, each person will receive a travel fee of 10,000 yuan in advance. If you are the talent you are looking for, please quickly pack your bags, watches, and high-end suits, and be sure to accept them. Afraid of being snatched away. Everything is so beautiful. Everyone feels that wages will always rise, stocks will always rise, unemployment will never occur, and summer will never end. That was an era of economic development reaching illusion, and also an era of beauty reaching illusion. The economic and cultural strength has amazed the Western world, but there is also a sense of unfamiliar threat. In 1988, Tokyo, an ordinary office worker, was too trendy. On the other end of the Pacific, life for Americans is not very easy. First, they were trapped to death on the Vietnam battlefield, followed by a series of explosions in the Middle East. The oil crisis triggered a devastating stagflation crisis, and the unemployment rate soared to 10%. In 1983, Lee Morgan, then president of Caterpillar, released Reasons and Solutions for the Mismatch between the US dollar and the Japanese yen, accusing Japan of using its exchange rate advantage to take advantage of the United States and resulting in a decrease in national income. Throughout the 1980s, one-third of the US trade deficit came from Japan, with a huge deficit. After the report was issued, it quickly sparked a wave of anti-Japanese protests in the United States through media fermentation. Unemployed American workers smashed Japanese cars on the street, even politicians took the lead in smashing Japanese radios in front of the White House. After many friendly consultations, the United States, Japan, Germany, Britain, and France signed the Plaza Accord on September 22, 1985. The original intention is just to devalue the US dollar, and the yen and Deutsche Mark will appreciate significantly in an orderly manner, so as to increase exports and reduce the trade deficit. Outsiders don't see it that way. This is not equivalent to telling the world, come quickly, pick up the money. You just need to buy the yen in the first place, wait for the appreciation and sell it, and then lie back and make money. More importantly, hot money pouring into Japan, waiting for appreciation during this period, can't we just let it go? That's too wasteful. Buy a house, buy stocks. Boost the Japanese market. Japanese people feel very satisfied with this, and their money is inexplicably even more valuable, becoming unprecedentedly wealthy. They're like Chinese ants a few years ago, crazily buying and selling overseas. You can't spend it all, you can't spend it all. As more and more hot money piled up, the Japanese yen slowly rose, rising by 80% within a year and quickly exceeding the expected 20% range. The Bank of Japan also believes that such an increase is not feasible. So the interest rate was lowered from 5% to 2.5%, and a large amount of money was printed to release to the market. I'm not interested in money, please don't go up. The effect of releasing water is very good, but it has triggered a big thunder, housing prices. When people realize that loans do not require much interest, but the returns on real estate and stock trading are high, fools also know what to do. Back then, there was a small parking lot owner named Watanabe who accumulated a fortune of 700 billion yen by buying a house with a loan, then using a mortgage loan, then buying a house again, then using a mortgage to buy a house again. In the documentary, he meaningfully said, "That was really a good era, a good era. Lie down and win, of course it's good. He is good, there must be someone who is not good." Laozi said, "The opposite is the movement of the Tao. Anything that reaches its extreme will transform towards the opposite. The era pays dividends to some people at the cost of others. The extravagance of luxury in a prosperous era has never been the state of ordinary people's lives, but rather the daily lives of vested interests. It's like during our Republic of China period, freedom, openness, and the emergence of talented and beautiful people. That was a good era for big landlords, big warlords, and big capital, but it was a bad era for countless leap lands. Do you want real estate or people?" In 1989, Japan's total land assets were 2,000 trillion yen, while the United States, which is 30 times larger in area, only had about 500 trillion yen. It is not a joke to sell Tokyo Bay and buy America. After becoming wealthy through real estate. Back then, Japanese people consumed 70% of the world's luxury goods, and famous brand stores around the world were crowded with Japanese people who went overseas to search. Back then, the entire Japanese society was trying to cater to consumption, and merchants artificially shaped every festival into Valentine's Day and Carnival, encouraging young people to enjoy it to the fullest. At that time, instantism became the mainstream, and consumption is virtue was the consensus of everyone. Does this scene seem familiar? But this is just a meta-narrative. Is it possible for the entire population to participate in the money-rolling millionaire game? Obviously impossible. The basic rule of the game for real estate speculation is to get rich first and squeeze the later part. Japanese economist Yoshio Noguchi once wrote in the post-war economic history of Japan, "If more and more people get something for nothing, it indicates that society is moving towards the wrong direction." This was the case in the economic bubble of the 1980s. By using financial management techniques, one can gain profits without labor, or by developing a golf course with bare hands, one can accumulate huge assets, and even make huge profits by buying and selling hard works. The rapid development of Japan's post-war economy stems from the hard work of the Japanese people. When they become rich through hard work and are ridiculed by others, economic development deviates from common sense. The reason is simple: the resources and wealth of the entire society have not increased, and some people have become wealthy overnight, which means that more people have fallen into poverty. It is said that Japan reached its peak in the 1980s, which is only for a small number of people. The group of people who got rich first made huge profits through real estate speculation, pushing up the cost of living of young people. The young people who grew up later, looking at the gold everywhere, were filled with despair in their hearts. Even if you work for a lifetime, it's not as much as 1/10 of what the previous generation made from real estate speculation. On the other hand, the real industry is depressed. The income of workers is getting lower and lower, but the cost of living is getting higher and higher. At that time, young Japanese people had the longest working hours in the world. In order to improve efficiency, companies called on employees to wring towels, that is, squeezing the last drop of sweat. It was simply a wolf-like nature, even more exaggerated than the theory of fortune. So hardworking, but only in vain. No matter how crazy you are working, your income will never match half of the rise in housing prices. So what's the point of going to work? The entire Japanese society is permeated with a restless atmosphere where one cannot speculate or be foolish. So, in the era of national prosperity, ordinary people became increasingly introverted, their quality of life became lower, and the marriage and childbirth rates plummeted. It's exactly the same as us a few years ago. In summary, if this continues, let alone the future, Japan will not even have the next generation. On Labor Day in 1987, 3.9 million Japanese marched against dismissal and pay cut. The birth rate is the answer given by the silent majority. Many people have a fixed idea that Japan's fertility rate was reduced after the foam burst and slid into the lost 30 years. Actually, the opposite is true. As shown in the figure below, the birth rate has been declining since Japan's high-speed urbanization in the 1970s. Especially during the so-called golden period of 1985 to 1990, the birth rate experienced the most severe decline. It's almost like a blood avalanche. It is not the low fertility rate caused by the bursting of the foam and the economic downturn. On the contrary, after the initiative to burst the foam, the downward trend of Japan's fertility rate also slowed down. Obviously, it's useless to say how much better the country and economy are. For individuals, the living environment is the most important factor for the survival of society. The real turning point lies in housing prices. Want real estate, economic bubble, or people? This is not difficult to choose. At the end of 1989, the Bank of Japan began to raise interest rates significantly and took the initiative to burst the economic foam. The period of labor was extremely tragic, with a large amount of wealth accumulated by the people over the past few decades annihilated, factories in various regions closed down, countless people were laid off, and people were in a state of anxiety and depression. Since then, Japan's real estate industry has experienced a 20-year bear market, losing at least 1,500 trillion yen in wealth. The Nikkei index has fallen for 30 consecutive months, with an average daily transaction volume dropping by 89% and a market value loss of 56%. That's what we often say about the lost 20 years. This evaluation is actually biased. If the land is lost, both people and land will be lost. If people lose their land, both people and land will survive. At the cost of economic pain, slightly bring back the birth rate of blood avalanche. The gains and losses cannot be simply judged from the economic data of the past few decades. For a country, this transaction is definitely profitable. Everything is possible when people are still there. Most persuasively, in the lost 20 years, Japanese technology is still making progress, 1 Nobel Prize a year. This may not be the truth, but it does create the current situation. Now, similar stories may be repeated on a broader land. Same recipe, familiar taste. How should we choose? As if waking up from a dream. There is a book in Japan called Old Empress Bankruptcy. It is written about the group of people born in the 1950s, known as the Twan generation, who experienced the economic boom of the mid-19th century and were the wealthiest generation in Japan. But this group of people, in their old age, fell into poverty. Why? Because of gnawing old. The children of the Twan generation, also known as the next generation, are born after 1975. They fell ill with blood mold, and as soon as they entered society, the Japanese economy took a sharp turn for the worse. Even worse, the Asian financial crisis that followed also came with a large number of companies going bankrupt. As a result, the next generation fell into economic poverty and had to squat at home. Their parents, although they have received the dividends of the times, on the one hand, they need to subsidize their children, and on the other hand, they also need to support their own parents, which puts a lot of pressure on them. In 2019, according to a report from the Cabinet Office, there were already 1.1 million hermits in Japan. In the Edagawa district of Tokyo, 1 out of every 24 households lives at home. Most of them are middle-aged men and women in their 30s, 40s, or even 50s. This phenomenon has begun to emerge in China. Recently, a new profession in China has become popular: full-time children. Home office, no need to leave early and return late, no workplace bullying, the boss is his own parents, every month there is a guaranteed salary. The job responsibilities are also quite easy. Wake up at 9 o'clock, walk the dog at 10 o'clock, and then go to the kitchen to help. Have lunch, take a nap, skin your phone until the afternoon, help make dinner, chat with your parents after dinner, take a walk, and the happy day of full-time work is over. According to insiders, I focus on being a companion, and I don't want to harm my body for thousands of dollars in salary. It is estimated that normal people will have to roast about it. It is an upgraded version of gnawing the old. How can it be called full-time children? Actually, just look at Japan and you'll know what's going on.